Now, originally in Proto-Semitic, and we find similarities for these sounds also in Ugaritic, there are about 30 different consonantal sounds, most of which are included in Ugaritic, many of which are even today used in Arabic. But in the earliest inscriptions that we have of Phoenician Hebrew and Aramaic, the signs are limited to about 22 characters. The differentiation between the sin and the shin doesn't really show up until the Middle Ages in terms of the written sign. So there are differences between how words are spelled in Hebrew and Aramaic. This is because this group of 30 consonants are probably still spoken in both Hebrew and Aramaic. But because they are using a Phoenician alphabet with only 22 signs, they will often double up sounds with one sign, and they do it differently on some occasions. And if we look down this list, we will see, for example, that with Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, the spelling you will find in Hebrew and Aramaic is identical. However, in Proto-Semitic and in Ugaritic, there is another sound, a the. It's written as a D with a line underneath it. This is probably in the early days spoken in Hebrew and Aramaic, but Hebrew represents it with a Zion, whereas Aramaic represents it by either Zion or Dalet, depending on the geographical region or time period. The Hey remains identical, the Vav, the Zion, the true Zion, the Chet. Notice that Proto-Semitic and Ugaritic have another ch sound, a little curvy line underneath it, which has collapsed into the chet in both Hebrew and Aramaic. The tet is the same, but there is an emphatic z, z with a dot underneath it, in Proto-Semitic, or at least in Ugaritic, and this is represented in Hebrew by a tzadi, but in Aramaic by a tet. The yod is the same. Kaf, lamed, mem, nun, samik, ayin are all the same. There is in Ugaritic and also in modern Arabic a ghayan sound. It's written as a G with a little accent, and it has collapsed into the ayin in both Hebrew and Aramaic. Pei and tzadi are the same, but notice there is in Proto-Semitic and Ugaritic an emphatic D, and it in Hebrew is represented by a tzadeh, but in Aramaic either by an ayin or a kof. And the most common word you will find this is, while in Hebrew you have the word eretz, in Aramaic is either ar-ah with an ayin or ar-ka with Aramaic. The kof, resh, shin are the same, but the sin is sometimes represented in Aramaic by a samik. The tav is the same, but there is in Proto-Semitic and Ugaritic a shin, a th sound, and that th sound is represented in Hebrew by shin, but in Aramaic either by shin or by tav. So, there are also vowel differences. For example, in Hebrew, if you have an open syllable next to an accent, it will have a lengthened vowel, for example, a comet. But in Aramaic, whatever vowel is original becomes shva. Also, Biblical Aramaic uses few segulate nouns, the sagol pattern that is very common in Hebrew. Melech is really one of the few exceptions. And there is no Canaanite shift in Aramaic. Now, the Canaanite shift, if you didn't learn about it in Hebrew, is where an original long A in the Canaanite languages shifted to a long O sound when it was accented. So, for example, you have Hebrew shalom, whereas in Aramaic it is shalom. And we will see other examples in a moment. Other vowel differences can be seen in John's pages 6 and 7.